Is going to be my starting quarterback rankings of the 2023 NFL season. It's come to a conclusion. Super Bowl just ended a few days ago, so I thought it was a good time to go re-rank every single quarterback from this season. I have a very small mark to qualify for this. I only took quarterbacks who have played or started 4 games, played an equivalent of 4 games. That's a pretty small benchmark, but I wanted to include some guys like Mason Rudolph and Anthony Richardson who only played 4 games. But because he only played so little games, I'm going to, probably hold them accountable a little bit and not just give them the benefit of a doubt because they've only played 4 games. So take that into account. And I'm also taking, playoff performances into account as well. So, the stats I show you on screen don't make sense for rankings. Just keep in mind maybe their playoff performances has something else to do with it. So yeah, we're going to get started here with number 50 is going to be PJ Walker. I don't want to talk too much about every single player. I got the whole stats listed here so you can look at everything. I'm just going to touch on some of the big stuff because I don't want this video to be over an hour long. All right, so PJ Walker went 1-1 in his starts. He played in total of about 6 games, which gives him an average of about really 4 total games. That's kind of how I did this. He started 2 games, played 2 full games there, and he played parts of 4 other games, which basically accounts for 2 more full games. So the math there adds up to 4 games. So that's the math on that. But he was not good. He had 1 touchdown and 7 total turnovers in his 4 games and only 176 yards per game. So not very good, especially with 48% completion. He was just not a good quarterback this year. Number 49 is going to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson of the Cleveland Browns as well. He went 1-2 in his starts. Basically played a total of 4 games. He was a little bit better than PJ Walker. He only had 1 touchdown to 4 turnovers, so a lot better than 7. He had only 126 yards per game, though. That's pretty bad. Obviously, and still very bad, like completion percentage and passer rating of only at 51 passer rating. 48 is going to be Trevor Siemian. He went 2-1 in his 3 starts. He played basically the equivalent of 4 games. So he actually had a winning record, so that's interesting to see there. He didn't really play a lot of good teams in those games, so that has something to do with it. But he had two touchdowns to 7 turnovers, so still not very good. 191 yards a game, still not very good. 56% completion and 62 passer rating is still not very good. Number 47 is going to be Bailey Zappi. He was not good either. He started 6 games, went 2-4 in his starts, played an equivalent of about 8 games. He had 7 touchdowns to 9 turnovers, so definitely not great there. Averaging about 1.5 turnovers a game-ish, kind of a little bit over 1 turnover a game. Not good at all. Nearly 60% completion, which is like kind of okay, but it's still kind of bad. And only a 68 pass rating is also pretty bad. Number 46 is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. So the first guy here that was a projected start at the beginning of the season. He started the first 6 games, got benched because he simply was not playing good. He averaged about 207 yards a game, 65% completion is all right, 77% passer or 77 passer rating is all right, but only a 7-to-9 touchdown interception ratio is not very good. Next up is going to be Daniel Jones, who also started at the beginning of the season until he got injured. Went 1-5 in his 6 starts. 3 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Not a very good, ratio there. Only 185 yards a game. Not very good. His completion percentage was 67, which is actually really, really good there. But that's about the only good thing he did all season. Number 44 is going to be Easton Stick. So actually, I thought he did pretty solid considering he has had like 0 NFL experience before this. He had 250 yards per game, which is pretty solid. 4 touchdowns to 5 turnovers, okay. As long as he can get his fumbles down, because he only threw 1 pick in 5 games, which is actually really good, but he just fumbled the ball 4 times as well. So if he can work on his fumbles a little bit, I think this guy could be a really good, solid backup quarterback because he had 250 yards a game, 64% completion, and an 85 passer rating. All pretty good numbers there. It's just his fumbles that are really holding him back here. Next up is going to be Mac Jones. I think we all know that Mac Jones was not a good quarterback this year. Went 2-9 in his 11 games started. He averaged about 246 yards per game, which is solid. But 10 touchdowns to 14 turnovers is really bad. So yeah, he was simply just not a good quarterback this year either. I had him ranked at number 27 earlier in the season, at the beginning of the season, but obviously fell down a few spots. Number 42 is going to be Tyson Bagent. I thought he did pretty decent, average about 242 yards per game in his 4 games that he played. He went 2-2 in his starts, which is pretty solid. Um, about 5 touchdowns to 9 turnovers is not great, obviously, but he had solid completion percentage at 65%, passer rating of 71, which is not great, but I thought he played pretty decent for a rookie quarterback who nobody probably heard of before, this season. Number 41 is going to be Ryan Tannehill. So I kind of predicted that this guy was going to have a bad season, and he did just that. He had 187 yards per game, which is not good. He had 5 touchdowns to 7 turnovers, which is not good. 7 interceptions in 9 games is not horrible, but only 5 touchdowns in 9 games is pretty bad. He had a solid completion percentage of about 65. An okay passer rating of 79-ish. That's still not good, but like it's not completely horrible. But yeah, very bad touchdown turnover ratio there, and not a lot of yards per game. Number 40 is going to be Bryce Young for me. He went 2 and 14 in his 16-game start, 195 yards per game. 11 to 10 passing touchdown to interception ratio, but he had 6 lost fumbles as well. Really brings that down for me. And he completed under 60% of his passes. Simply not a good year for him. Number 39 is going to be Mitchell Trubisky. He went 0-2 in his game started, played about 4 total games. Only had 171 total yards per game, which is not good. A 6 to 5 touchdown interception ratio. I guess it's okay because it is positive there, but still not great. 62% completion is decent, I guess. 72 pass rating is not very good. I didn't think it was a horrible, quarterback in his few games played, but he obviously was not a good quarterback either. Number 38 is going to be Zach Wilson. He was 4-7 in his 11 games started. He had 225 yards per game, doing pretty good there. About a 60% completion percentage is not that good, but it ain't completely horrible. 77 pass rating, about the same there. But 8 touchdowns to 14 total turnovers. He had 7 fumbles lost in 11 games, which is not good at all. As long as he can bring his fumbles down, he could be a lot better. But having, almost double the amount of turnovers as you did touchdowns is not a good look. Number 37 is going to give us Taylor Heinicke. He went 1-4 in his 4 games started. Had about 250 yards per game, which is pretty good there, but a very bad completion percentage of only 54%. 74 passer rating is still not good, and only 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions in 4 games. Not a horrible ratio there. The main thing that comes down to him is his overall accuracy. You cannot be completing only 54% of your passes and be a good quarterback in this league. Next up is going to be Tommy DeVito. He went 3-3 in his 6 game started. He played roughly 7 total games here. He didn't have a lot of yards per game. He only about 187 or 185 yards per game. But everything else he did was really, honestly, pretty good. A 64% completion percentage is really solid. 89 pass rating is pretty solid, and a 9-4 touchdown interception ratio is definitely really good to see out of a rookie quarterback here. The main thing is, you're only having 185 yards per game, so you're just simply not really throwing the ball a whole lot. So that could also inflate your numbers a little bit because you're only throwing you're not taking a whole lot of chances downfield and stuff. So you're not necessarily getting a whole lot of reps in there. So you're just doing good with the limited reps that you have, but that might not necessarily translate if you were, actually being aggressive on offense. Number 35 is going to be Nick Mullens in the Minnesota Vikings. He went 0-3 in his 4 games. In his 3 games started, played about 4 games. His main thing he did here, he was pretty efficient. Having 67% completion, 88 passer rating, and 333 yards per game with 7 touchdowns. But he also threw 8 interceptions in his 4 games. So interceptions is mainly the only thing this guy did wrong. Other than that, he was a really good quarterback. But you cannot be throwing 2 picks a game and expect be ranked very high on this list. Next up will be Joshua Dobbs. I thought he played a little bit better than Nick Mullens. Definitely a lot better than I thought he was going to be at the beginning of the season because I had him as the worst quarterback coming into the season. And he certainly was not the worst quarterback to play this year. He went 3-9 in his 12 starts. Not great there, but about 2,500 passing yards is pretty good. About 2,900 total yards. Getting to over 220 yards per game is solid. 63% completion and 80 pass rating is solid. But he only had 19 touchdowns to 17 turnovers, which is not the best ratio. Number 33 is going to give us Desmond Ridder. He was number 29 on my list, so moving down a couple spots, but I kind of got this one right. Did not think he was going to be a great quarterback this year, and simply was not a great quarterback this year. Went 6-7 in his game started. Had about 2,800 total passing yards. Still not great. 233 yards per game is okay. A solid completion percentage and passer rating, but only 17 total touchdowns to 19 turnovers is not a good sign. Next up is going to give us Aiden O'Connell. I thought this guy played pretty solid this season compared to any expectations that we had of this guy. He went 5-5 in his 10-game started, which is really good. Solid completion percentage and passer rating there. 13 touchdowns to 9 turnovers. Honestly, wasn't bad. He just had a measly 202 yards per game, kind of underwhelming there. But honestly, I thought he was pretty decent. I think the Raiders would not be completely crazy to give this guy the starting job for next season. Number 31 is going to give us Will Levis. He went 3-6 in his 9 games played. Had about 800 or 1,800 yards this season, a little over 200 yards per game. 84 passer rating is pretty solid, but only a 58% completion percentage, not good there, and only a 9-8 touchdown turnover ratio. So got to get those numbers up a little bit, but I think this guy could definitely be a really good quarterback in the future. Next up is going to give us Tyrod Taylor. This guy definitely played a lot better than I thought he was going to do this season. Went 2-3 in his 5 games played. Obviously, did not have him ranked at the beginning of the year because I did not expect Daniel Jones to get hurt. But even when they announced Tyrod Taylor was going to start, I was like, yeah, this is not going to go well. But he honestly wasn't horrible. Had a really solid 64% completion and 89 passer rating with over 250 yards per game. Only a 5 touchdown to 3 turnover ratio. Only 5 touchdowns in 6 games is not great. But, only 3 interceptions in 6 games is actually pretty solid. Next up is going to give us Sam Howell. So this guy started every game with 3-14 in his games and had nearly 4,000 passing yards, which is solid. 21 touchdowns to 21 interceptions. Really bad there. A total of 26 to 23 touchdown turnover ratio. Definitely not what you want to see out of your starting quarterback. He was decent with 63% completion, but you just cannot be turning it over 23 times in an NFL season and expect to be ranked very high on this list. And he's probably not going to be a starting quarterback next season because of his turnover issues. Number 28 is going to give us Deshaun Watson. He went 5-1 in his 6 games started, but he simply was not a great quarterback. I thought this guy could have been, getting back to his elite quarterback days because of what we've seen last year. I thought maybe, that was just rusty and he's missed almost 2 full seasons. But after having a full off season and a full preseason stuff to prepare for this upcoming year, he was basically the exact same player he was last year, which is still a solid quarterback, but nothing too crazy. 8 total touchdowns to 6 turnovers, not great. 250 yards a game is okay. 61% completion is okay, I guess. So he was an okay quarterback, but definitely not anything close to a prime Deshaun Watson. Number 27 is going to give us Kenny Pickett. Went 7-5 in his 12 games played. I thought he was pretty solid. He didn't make too much mistakes. He just did not take a lot of chances. Part of that might have been because Matt Canada, did not really want him taking any chances. But he did not even average over 200 yards per game, which is not good. A 7 touchdown to 4 interception is a good ratio. But how do you only have 7 total touchdowns in 11 games? That's really, really kind of sad. Next up is going to be Anthony Richardson. He only played 4 games, so definitely not the best sample size here. 7 touchdowns to 1 interception in those 4 games is really good. 238 yards, it's pretty solid. About 62% completion is not good, but I feel like you can definitely get those numbers up next season. Definitely, think his touchdown to turnover ratio is a little bit inflated considering he only played 4 games. So I definitely think if he played the full season, he would not have a 7-1 touchdown turnover ratio because that'd be kind of insane for a rookie quarterback, for any quarterback really, but definitely a rookie quarterback. Number 25 is going to give us Gardner Minshew, the other Colts quarterback this season. I thought he was pretty solid. In his 13 games started, he had 3,300 passing yards, ended up being a Pro Bowler. Not that that really means a whole lot anymore, but 18 touchdowns to 14 turnovers is okay. 260 yards per game is pretty solid. He was a pretty solid quarterback this season. Number 24 is going to be Mason Rudolph. He went 3-0 in his regular season, and then he had 1 playoff game, so he was actually pretty good in all of his games. Definitely the best Steelers quarterback this season. He averaged 242 yards per game, which is almost 50 more yards a game than Kenny Pickett did with the exact same roster. He also threw 3 touchdowns to 0 turnovers in his 3 games, so that's good to see. A really, really good completion percentage at 74 and a really good pass rating at 118. Obviously, these numbers are going to be very inflated because he only played in 3 total games. So, I'm not really going to keep him. I'm not really going to like try to assume that he would keep those numbers up throughout an entire season because that's probably not very realistic. But obviously, if he was keeping these numbers up all year, he'd probably be like a top 10 quarterback with those efficiency numbers there. But, you know, definitely don't think Mason Rudolph would keep these numbers up for an entire season. Number 23 is going to give us Justin Fields here. He had 5 and 8 in his 13 games started. He's going to move down about 3 total spots in my rankings this year. He was pretty solid, 2,500 yards passing, 600 yards rushing, almost 250 yards per game, which is solid. 20 total touchdowns to 13 turnovers. It's honestly pretty solid. I thought I had a pretty good season, but I really am expecting this guy to take take that next step. But obviously it did not happen this season, and it's probably not going to happen next season because he's probably going to go to a new team. So unless he goes to a team with a really good offensive line and a lot of weapons. A team like the Atlanta Falcons with a really good offensive line and a lot of weapons could actually, very much help this guy take the next step. Number 22 is going to be Trevor Lawrence, going to drop 13 spots. I had him all the way at number 9, but he simply was not a really good quarterback this year like he was last year. Went 8-8 in the 16 games started for about 4,000 yards passing. 270 yards per game is solid. 65% completion, solid. 88 passer rating, solid. But only 26 touchdowns to 21 turnovers. You cannot be having 21 turnovers as a starting quarterback and expect to be very high on this list unless you have insane touchdown totals to back it up, and he simply does not have that. Number 21 is going to give us Geno Smith. He was basically the exact same player he was last year. He's going to drop only 3 spots in my rankings. 8-7 in his game started. 3,600 yards are really good there. 250 yards per game, solid. Had 21 touchdowns to 12 turnovers. The really good numbers there. So he was a really solid quarterback. Maybe took a minor step back from last year, but practically the same player. Number 20 is going to give us Kyler Murray. So I did not have him ranked at the beginning of the season because I did not know 100% sure if he was actually going to play this year. So I did not rank him. But he was pretty solid. Had 2,000 total yards in his 8 games, over 250 yards per game. Pretty good completion percentage and passer rating, and a really good touchdown turnover ratio of 13-5. If he would have, had those numbers for the entirety of the season, he'd probably be ranked a little bit higher. But because he only played 8 games, he's going to find himself here at number 20. Number 19 is going to be Joe Flacco. Went 4-1 in his 5 games played. I thought he was really good this year. Had 323 yards a game, which was really freaking good. A 90 passer rating is really solid. Only a 60% completion, which is subpar for sure. But 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions is a solid ratio there. Definitely would like it to be a little bit better, but you can't really complain too much considering this guy, was really, really good this year after not having a job until November. Number 18 is going to give us Derek Carr. Went 9-8 in his 17 games played, so he played the entire season. He had nearly 4,000 yards, sitting there at 3,800. 230 yards per game is okay. Really good completion percentage at 68 and a good passer rating at 98. And he had a really good touchdown turnover ratio at 25-11. So I thought it was a really solid quarterback this year. He just not have anything that was too amazing to give him much higher on this list. But I definitely think he's the start of the higher tier of quarterbacks from this season. Number 17 is going to give us Baker Mayfield. I definitely did not think Baker Mayfield would, find himself all the way up here on this list. I had him coming in at number 28 at the beginning of the year. Definitely was better than I expected him to be. He had over 4,000 yards in his 17 games played, nearly 250 yards per game, really solid completion and passing rating, and had 29 touchdowns to only 13 total turnovers. So, yeah, a lot better than I thought it was going to be at the beginning of the season. And I'm excited to see this guy potentially, be resurrecting his career for the long haul. Number 16, I'm going to go with Tua Tagovailoa. I had him at number 10 preseason, but he definitely dropped a little bit there. He was definitely not as good this year as he was last year, I think. Had 4,600 yards still, which is really good in the 17 games played. 276 yards per game is still really good. Really good completion percentage at 69. Really good pass rating at 101. just had 29 touchdowns to 19 turnovers. Like, that's not the best ratio there. Obviously, you would like to be at least 2-1 as a starting quarterback for the entire season, but it wasn't like, obviously it wasn't horrible. Just not. I don't think he was up to the same caliber of player that he was last season. Number 15, I'm going to go with Russell Wilson. I thought he was pretty solid. His yards per game wasn't like amazing. He had 3,000 yards in his 15 games played, good for about 225 yards per game. Solid completion percentage and passer rating. 29 touchdowns to 13 turnovers is pretty solid. That's over a 2-1 ratio, like I was talking about with Tua. So that's the main reason why he's going to get himself here over Tua Tagovailoa, even if his yards per game was significantly less. His touchdown turnover ratio was significantly higher. Next up will be Jake Browning. So this guy did only play like 8 games. But I thought he was like really, really good in his 8 games that I had to, put him all the way up here at number 14. Had nearly 260 yards per game, had over 70% completion, 98 passer rating, 15 total touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. That's over a 2-1 ratio. And I thought he played really, really solid in his 8 games. So because of that, I'm going to give him this spot all the way up here at number 14. It's a lot higher than I expected to put him coming into this ranking, but I feel like this just makes sense. Number 13, I'm going to go with Jordan Love. I thought he was really good this year as well. 9-8 in his 17 games played, nearly 260 yards per game, about 4,100 passing yards. Solid completion percentage and solid passer rating with 36 touchdowns to 14 turnovers. That's just really, really good to see out of a guy in his first year starting. That's nearly a 2.5 to 1 rating there, or ratio there, which is really good. And 36 touchdowns was among the most out of any starting quarterback this season. Number 12 is going to be Joe Burrow. He had a 5-5 record in his 10 games played, about 240 yards per game. Thought he was pretty solid. Had a 15-6 touchdown turnover ratio, which is really good, and a solid completion percentage and passer rating as well. Number 11, I am going to go with Jalen Hurts. I thought he was really good this year. Obviously, he's still really good, but definitely worse season this year than last year. I don't really think that's debatable. Had about 262 yards per game, 3,800 passing yards, about 4,400 total yards, and a 38-20 touchdown to turnover ratio. 15 rushing touchdowns for this guy. Majority of those were about 1 to 2 yard rushes with the tush push, but still counting stats definitely show that Jalen Hurts was still a really good quarterback this season, but I definitely think he was worse than he was last year. Number 10, I'm going to go with C.J. Stroud. I thought he was really good this year, obviously. 285 yards per game was amazing. 9-6 rating, or 9-6 record in his 15 games played, 4,100 yards. Over 100 pass rating is really good. 26-9 touchdown and turnover ratio, nearly a 3-1 as a rookie is really, really good. Number 9, I'm going to go with Matthew Stafford. Went 9-6 in his 15 games played. I had him at number 15 coming in. He's definitely going to jump up quite a bit of spots here. He had over 4,000 total yards, about 270 yards a game, and a 24 touchdown to 11 interception ratio, which is really, really good there. That is over 2-1. And I thought he played pretty good in his singular playoff game. Number 8, I'm going to go with Jared Goff. He went 12-5 in his 17 games played, about 4,500 yards there to about 270 yards per game average. He had 32 total touchdowns to 16 turnovers, which is a 2-1 ratio, which is pretty good, and a really solid completion percentage and passer rating, and I thought he played good in his playoff games as well. Number 7 is going to be Justin Herbert, following just a couple of spots here. I expected him to take a little bit more of a leap from last year. He didn't really do that. He was also injured, so he missed a few games. And one of his top receivers, Mike Williams, was injured for the majority of the season. So that obviously, would hurt Justin Herbert's numbers as well a little bit. He had nearly about 280 yards per game in his 13 total games. Really solid completion percentage and passer rating as well. And a 23-7 touchdown turnover ratio is really, really good. It is over 3-1. So I thought that was really, really good for Justin Herbert, and he's still definitely an elite quarterback in this league. Number 6 is going to go with Brock Purdy. I thought he was really good. You can say the stats are empty stats, or he got carried by his teammates. I don't really care. He put up these stats, and a lot of this rankings is based off of stats slash playoff eye tests and stuff, because that's really what matters most in my eyes. So I'm gonna go give him the number 6 spot here, jumping up 11 spots as I had him at number 17 in my preseason poll. 4,200 passing yards is really good. 275 yards a game, really good. Really good passer rating. Got 113 is amazing. 69% completion is really good. And a total of 33 to 13 touchdown turnover ratio is really freaking good. Number 5, I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins. He only played 8 games, but I thought he was amazing in his 8 games. I thought he could potentially be an MVP candidate in his first 8 games. Obviously, his record, at 4-4, was not going to really garner any real MVP consideration, but I thought he was definitely playing at an MVP level in his first 8 games. He had nearly 300 yards per game, nearly 70% completion with over 100 passer rating, and a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, or touchdown to turnover ratio. Sorry. Number 4, I am going to go with Josh Allen, dropping 1 spot. I had him at number 3 last season. He had 4,300 passing yards, 500 rushing yards, about 284 total yards per game. Pretty solid completion percentage and passer rating as well, with 44 total touchdowns this season, which is amazing, and 22 turnovers. So a 2-to-1 ratio there. Still pretty solid, and he was pretty good in his playoff games as well. Number 3, I'm going to go with Dak Prescott. Jumped up 9 spots here, all the way from number 12 up to number 3. He had 4,500 yards, about 280 yards per game, a lot better than I thought he was going to do this season. Nearly a 70% completion percentage with 105 passer rating and 38 touchdowns to 11 turnovers. He had a 4-to-1 passing touchdown to interception ratio, and there's still obviously a really good touchdown to turnover ratio in total. So I thought he played a really, really good season. Definitely one of the best statistical seasons of the season. But his playoff game was simply not good. So that might, hurt his spot a little bit compared to the guys at number 1 and number 2. But obviously, I also don't really think no one's going to be arguing for Dak Prescott to be better than either of the 2 guys I have ahead of him, which, if you can't tell, are going to be Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. You can see the order right now. Number 2, I am going to have Lamar Jackson. I know he was the MVP this season. He was still an amazing quarterback, 280 yards per game in his 16 games. 67% completion is good, 102 pass rating is really good. 29 to 14 touchdown turnover ratio, just slightly over a 2-to-1. I thought he was really good in his playoff games though, so that's mostly why I'm going to give him over Dak. I think Dak might have had a better statistical season, honestly, than Lamar Jackson. But Lamar, I think played better in the playoffs, so that's mostly why I'm going to give this to Lamar here. So yeah, he's going to jump up from number 7 last year, or preseason, all the way to number 2 right now. And the number 1 is going to be Patrick Mahomes. I know this might be controversial because the regular season, he definitely was not the best quarterback, but I feel like the way he played throughout the entirety of the playoffs is worthy of garnering the number 1 spot. And I don't really know if you're going to if a lot of people are actually going to argue whether or not Mahomes is the number 1 quarterback in the league, even though I think he did not have the best regular season of the season this year. I think his playoff accomplishments and playoffs numbers simply, speak for themselves, and I feel like he should be number 1 because of his performance in this year's playoffs. He had nearly 4,500 total yards, 4,200 passing yards, 285 yards per game. Only 27 touchdowns to 17 turnovers is not a good ratio. So that definitely, hurts his reputation there a little bit. But most of this number 1 ranking, I would probably have him at like number 3 if he did not, go on to win the Super Bowl and stuff. But because of his playoff performances and stuff, I'm going to give him the number 1 spot. Look at the quarterback who's missing from this list. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers. I had him coming in at number 6, and he played about 6 plays all year, not even, I think. So, obviously not going to make this list. But yeah, that is going to be the video. Thank you for watching. Make sure to come back the rest of the week. I'm going to have receiver, tight end, and running back videos coming out soon. So make sure to watch those, and thank you.